Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat sermon with Rabbi Adam Kligfeld.
As I was getting dressed this morning and putting on my shoes, I noticed that my black Shabbat shoes were dirty. Dirtier even than usual for me. And then it hit me. The last time I wore these shoes was 25 days ago. And the dirt on the shoes is earth from the cemetery in New York where I was standing to bury my mother. So at first I saw the dirty shoes and I was annoyed with myself. And then I recognized the source of the dirt, and I reminded myself yet again how recent it was that I was thrust back into Avelut, into mourning, as you can see from my scruffiness. And I've had opportunities to teach and be the rabbi here since that moment, but this is my first formal Shabbat morning sermon since that day. And looking at my shoes brought me back to the drama and the pain of those days. But days that also had sanctity. We were surrounding her in her hospital room, both of her children, 5 of her 6 grandchildren, her sister, her nieces, to do the vidui, to say goodbye because we knew the end was coming, to offer one last kiss. And then when the last breath was over, which is a terrifying and holy moment, doing what you might call in Hebrew stimat einayim, closing of the eyes. It's not just in the Jewish tradition that one of the ways in which we honor a body that is no longer containing life is to close the eyelids forever. And when I did that with my mother, that stima, I was reminded of what I sometimes say when I'm leading a meditation, which is that I invite people to close their eyes not for sleep, but for a different kind of wakefulness. And here I was closing my mother's eyes not for sleep of a night, but for sleep eternal. And I think about that verb, listom, to close, to block, because that verb is very much connected to the Parshat Vayechi. And not just because 2 of our patriarchs, Yaakov and Yosef, reached the end of their lives, therefore with their eyes being closed forever. In fact, one of the most noticeable things about the beginning of this parsha in the scroll itself is how non-noticeable it is. Teddy and I were talking about this early in the week. If you've looked at a Torah scroll, you know that there are columns, but there are places in the columns where there are full or partial breaks in the line to divide up the text. And certainly every parsha in the Torah begins after such a break, so it's pretty easy to find. Except for Parshat Vayechi. It's the only parsha that begins just the next word on the line. In fact, in most Torah scrolls, it's really hard to find. In this Torah scroll, this family scroll that is been dedicated in memory of Teddy's great-grandparents, the sofer, the scribe, did 2 things to make it slightly more noticeable. On the chet of Vayechi, there are these artistic curly cues beneath the letter, which is on no other chet in the scroll. And rather than putting a full break between the last word and this word, there's a miniature break so your eyes are drawn to it. But that's not usual. The usual is that you come upon Parshat Vayechi and it's called, in the tradition, stuma, same word, closed, blocked off. As some of us studied this past Shabbat afternoon at Mincha, the classic Midrash on the book of Reshit Midrash Rabbah gives 3 primary reasons as to why this parsha would have been stuma, closed off, not begun with an opening. One of them, to play with the word satam, is that God blocked Yaakov from all troubles. Meaning even though he lived a life that had travail and sadness, somehow emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, God blocked in the name of protecting him. So this parsha is blocked the way Yaakov experienced being blocked in a good way by God's presence. Another example, another answer, is the opposite emotional valence. That the moment that Yaakov died, Egypt began to close in, satam, on the Israelites. Because pretty soon, there's going to be a king who's going to arise who did not know the story, and we're going to be enslaved. So this parsha is a reminder that things felt like they were in a state of expanse, but pretty soon we're going to be blocked in. And the third answer given by the Midrash is that at the end of his life, Yaakov wanted to legalot et haketz, to reveal the end, meaning to solve all the mysteries of the future for his children and grandchildren, to let them know how all things were going to turn out. Because he was a prophet, and he normatively had access to Ruach HaKodesh, to spiritual information. But God satam, God blocked Yaakov from being able to see too far into the future. 3 explanations, all dealing with the use of satam. Yaakov was blocked from travail. Egypt was about to block them in. And Yaakov could not see into the future like he wanted to. I think they're all one answer, those 3 answers, or one sermon. When we bring life into this world as parents, and when we consider our own lives in this world, there are the things we fear that are going to block us. There are the things that we hope for, that we're going to have access to. And there's the truth of it all, which is that we have no idea how things are going to turn out. In the days immediately after my mother's death and burial, I learned of another loss in my life that I did some writing about on Facebook, the death of my dear teacher, Rabbi Eliezer Diamond, who succumbed to cancer after a long battle. He was a very important figure to me when I was in rabbinical school and to many, and he continued to be a source of great comfort and wisdom to me throughout the beginning part of my career. In fact, one time he gave me the greatest counsel ever. The punchline was, Adam, don't be a yutz. And if you want, I'll tell you the story leading up to it. But it was perfect, succinct counsel, and he was right. He chronicled his battle with cancer over years on Facebook. And upon his death, all of these homages from students came pouring onto the page. And someone resurfaced a drash that Rabbi Diamond had written for JTS, where he taught, where Rabbi Chorny and I went to school, from 2017 on this parsha, on Parshat Vayechi. Now, Rabbi Diamond was one of the most learned rabbis and teachers and sages I ever met. He knew rabbinic literature like I know the alphabet. He could have quoted innumerable sources in describing the meaning of Parshat Vayechi in 2017. In this particular beautiful Dvar Torah, he quotes not one single Jewish source, other than just saying it's the Parsha. He primarily focuses his Dvar Torah on 2 Christian paintings of the deathbed scene in the Parsha at the end of Yaakov's life. One of them is a miniature by the 15th century manuscript illuminator named, I'm going to butcher his name, François Le Barbier, also known as Maître François, 15th century. And the other is an engraving by a Dutch painter and engraver, Gerard Hoet, which appeared in the 1728 volume Figures de la Bible, Figures of the Bible. They're very, very different pieces of art depicting the same moment of the Parsha. The earlier one is orderly and gracious, as if everyone in the scene is protected from all the pain that's happening. All the sons are gathered. They're praying solemnly. Yaakov has a finger up in the picture as if to give instructions or a blessing. And in Rabbi Diamond's words, he wrote, words literally scroll from Yaakov's mouth, containing the request that he be buried in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. It's a regal, patriarchal, calm, neat and clean death. That's what everyone imagines and hopes for themselves. The other piece of art, very, very different. It's chaotic. In Rabbi Diamond's words, here we are in a riotous marketplace. Jacob's space is invaded by a horde of competing petitioners. One son has his head down upon the bed, his forearms raised and hands clasped in supplication. Others look toward Jacob in entreaty. One seems to be reasoning or perhaps arguing with his father. Another stands far from Jacob, leaning or rather sagging against the wall. His facial expression and body posture bespeak defeat and despair. If the first painting is ideal, the second one is all too real. And you can match up the first one with one of the Midrashim, God blocking Jacob, Yaakov, and the family from all harm, from all madness, from all confusion. All is orderly and well, even at death. And you can match up the second image, the second piece of art, with the second answer from the Midrash. The world is closing in on Yaakov and his family. Egypt is hovering. Family issues are making things complex. God cannot block them from it. God cannot spare them. Death and ends can be painful and ugly, and so can life be. And the third answer by the Midrash also hovers in those paintings. How is it all going to end? Can you predict from that moment every or even any future moment? Will it all work out? Will the family stay intact? What will the future be? We don't know. We know as readers because we know the rest of the text, but they didn't know it then. God blocks that from us. God blocked it from Yaakov. God even blocks those mysteries from Moshe when Moshe requests. That Midrash says almost everything that needs to be said about the life we hope for ourselves and our children. There can be times when we are protected from pain and harm. That's stima. There can be times when the world closes in on us. That's stima. And the future, no one can tell us what it will be. We've hit 2026, which seems like a futuristic number from some sci-fi movie in the 80s. It's a fractious time for our people. The Jews of the world and the Jews of New York are reasonably worried. What will be? Will we get that painting that is idealized, or we get the engraving that is more realistic? And what can we do about any of it? Two humble possibilities. In the aftermath of that scene, the family could have been thrust into turmoil. The brothers are rightly nervous that Yosef is finally going to take vengeance on them now that daddy is gone. And Yosef does not respond with harsh memory of how he was treated, but with the kind way to repair rifts in all relationships. He responds with chesed. Chesed as defined as more kindness than was expected or even earned. One of the ways we can respond to the not knowing of what will be is to live as many moments as possible like Yosef did after his father died, with chesed. And the second, going back to my teacher, Rabbi Diamond of blessed memory, I found his last Facebook post. At the end, as many of you know, with cancer, there's not just frailty and worry, but pain. Rabbi Diamond wrote this just a few days before he died. Ideally, one finds a way of weaving together all of one's experiences, good and bad, so that one is integrated personally, to use the language of psychology. I have not managed to do this, and so I have moved that which is essentially me to a mental and emotional location that is removed from my body with its constant aches and pains. I pay a price, he writes. I'm living at a remove from my physical being, the doing part of who I am. This creates a sense of distance from life as a whole. Even the Kadosh Baruch Hu, God, seems more distant. What draws me back to Hashem, if not to my life as a whole, is Psalm 23. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. He completes his last post, wherever I am, God is there too. I hope that I will return home soon. Rabbi Diamond saw God in it all. The calm, the chaos, the life, the death, the pain, the relief from pain. Whenever we close our eyes or someone closes it for us for the last time, may we have truly lived like Yaakov did, with chesed like Yosef did, with God, with the knowledge that while we cannot predict the future, we can curate it and live it more sweetly, more humanely, more.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.